The night I arrived at his house, I was 15 years old, and I was carrying everything I owned in a flour sack my mother had sewn shut at the top. She did not hug me when I left. She stood at the door with her hands folded in front of her apron, and she said, in Pennsylvania Dutch, "Be a good wife." That was all. The wagon pulled away, and I watched the only house I had ever slept in grow smaller behind me, until the road curved and it was gone. I did not cry. I had already decided I would not cry. His name was Elias. He was 43 years old. His first wife had died of fever the previous winter, leaving him with 3 children under the age of 10, and a farm that needed a woman's hands. He had come to my father in March. I was told in April. I was married in May. I am Anna. I am 85 years old. I grew up Old Order Amish in Lancaster County, Pennsylvania, in a world that had rules for everything. What you wore, what you said, how you stood in church, and no rules at all for what happened to a girl who did not want the life that was being handed to her. I share these stories because someone has to. If you have come this far into my voice, subscribe and tap the like button and tell me in the comments, how old were you when you first understood that your life was yours to live? I want to know. I read everyone now. Let me tell you about the night of May the 14th, 1953, and what I did in that house. Because it is not what you are thinking, and it changed everything. Before I take you there, you need to understand something about how the world worked in those years, in that community, in that particular corner of Lancaster County where I was born. The year was 1953. I was 15. In Old Order Amish life, a daughter was a practical matter, not spoken of that way, never spoken of that way, but lived that way. You were your father's until you were your husband's. The transfer happened at the bishop's word, in front of the community, and it was as unremarkable as selling a calf at market, except that the calf did not have to thank everyone afterward for the honor. My father was a respected man, deacon in our church district. 7 children, 5 of them daughters. He was not a cruel man in the way people imagine cruelty. He never raised his hand to us. He provided. He prayed at table every morning with a voice that carried something real in it, something that believed what it was saying. But daughters were a cost that ended when they married, and 5 daughters was a great many costs. I understood this the way you understand weather. Not a choice, simply the condition of the world you live inside. Elias had come to the house on a Thursday. I remember because Thursday was the day we made soap, and my hands smelled of lye all through the conversation I was not invited to have. I watched from the kitchen doorway as my father and this man I had seen perhaps twice at Sunday services sat at the table over coffee. Elias was large, not fat but solid, the kind of man whose presence fills a room without trying. His beard was brown going gray. He had quiet eyes. He did not look at me once during that visit. 3 days later, my father called me in from the garden. He sat me down. He told me Elias Byler was a good man, a hard-working man, a man who feared God and kept his farm well, and needed a wife and a mother for his children. He told me I would be married in 6 weeks. He told me this was a blessing, and then he looked at me with something in his eyes. I've spent 70 years trying to name. It was not guilt. Exactly. It was the face of a man who has decided not to look at what he is doing too closely. I said, "Father, I am 15, he said. "Your mother was 15. And that was the end of the conversation. I want to step out of this story for a moment. I want to say something directly to you, and then I will keep going. If you have come this far in the video, if you are still here, I think I already know something about you. I think you have spent a great many years inside walls someone else built, and you are only now standing in a room that is finally yours. I know that room. I know how strange and quiet it is when you first find yourself in it, and how long it takes before you stop waiting for someone to come tell you what to do next. What I learned in the years I have lived since that wagon ride, the years I took back slowly, the long work of becoming a woman who belongs to herself, I put into a small book, 4 weeks, one step at a time, in the order I walked it. I called it The Years That Are Still Yours. The link is in the first comment of this video, if any of what I just said belongs to you now. Back to where we were. The wedding was plain as all Amish weddings are. A Thursday in May. Benches in my parents' house. The bishop's voice for 4 hours a meal after. Roast chicken. Dried apple pie. My mother's good tablecloths on the tables. People spoke to me warmly. Several women squeezed my hands and said what a good man Elias was, what a good home I was going to. One of them, a woman named Sadie, who was perhaps 60 and had lived her whole life in the district, held my hands in both of hers and looked at me for a long moment with an expression I did not understand until I was much older. She did not say anything. She just held my hands, and then she let go. After the meal, the wagon was loaded. My flour sack. A quilt my grandmother had made me. A small wooden box with my few things inside. A comb, a spare prayer covering. The German Bible my mother had pressed into my hands that morning without speaking. Elias's farm was 4 miles from my father's. I had been there once, years before, for a frolic. I remembered a white house, a red barn, a yard that smelled of hay and manure and something sweet underneath. Clover, maybe, or the apple trees along the back fence. We did not speak much in the wagon. He asked me if I was cold. I said no. He nodded. The horses moved. The evening light came in long and gold through the trees. His children were waiting in the yard when we arrived. The oldest was 9. Her name was Ruth, and she stood with her arms at her sides and her chin up with the dignity of a much older person. She had her father's quiet eyes. The middle child was 7, a boy named Samuel who hid behind his sister, and the little one, she was not quite 4. She still had the soft, round face of a baby. Her name was Hannah, and she stood in the doorway of the house in her small, dark dress and her small, white covering, and she looked at me with the most careful expression I have ever seen on a child's face. I thought, these are my children now. Something settled in me at that moment. Not peace exactly. Something more like purpose. I did not choose to be in that yard. I did not choose any of it. But these 3 children had lost their mother in the winter, and it was spring now, and they were standing in a yard, watching a stranger step down from a wagon. And this stranger was going to be the person who fed them breakfast every morning and put them to bed. Every night, I could not choose the life, but I could choose what I did inside it. Elias showed me the house, the kitchen, the larder, the root cellar, the bedroom we would share. He showed me these things the way a man gives a tour of a property, which is, I suppose, what he understood it to be. He was not unkind. He was simply practical. He had lost a wife. He had acquired another. The farm would continue. The children ate supper. I had found enough in the larder to make a simple soup. Potatoes, dried beans, an onion, some salt pork. I did not know yet where anything was kept. I opened every cupboard carefully. Ruth watched me from the table with those careful eyes, assessing. I did not try to win her. I simply cooked. Supper was quiet. Elias prayed. The children ate. No one spoke much. Afterward, Samuel helped carry the dishes without being asked, which told me something about what kind of house this had been before the fever came. Then it was time to put the children to bed. This is what I want to tell you about. This is what I did on my first night in his house. I did not know these children. I had been in their home for 3 hours. Ruth was 9 and grieving, and watching me with eyes that said, "You are not her. You will never be her. Do not try." Samuel was 7 and cautious and polite in the way of boys who have been told to be brave. And little Hannah, 4 years old, still needing someone to tie her shoes, still needing to be carried sometimes, still with her mother's voice somewhere in the back of her memory. I took Hannah up to her room first. She did not resist. She let me unlace her shoes. She let me help her with her nightgown. She did not speak, but she watched my hands the whole time, the way a small animal watches something unfamiliar, deciding. I turned down the quilt on her small bed. I sat on the edge of it. And then I did something I had not planned to do, something that rose up out of me from some place I did not know was there. I sang to her. Not a hymn, not an husband verse. A song my own mother had sung to me when I was small, before the years made her quieter and quieter. A Pennsylvania Dutch lullaby, soft and low, about the moon coming to the window and the stars keeping watch. I do not even know if my mother remembered she had sung it to me. I am not sure she would have said it mattered, but I sang it, and Hannah lay very still, and after a moment she reached out one small hand, and she put it on my knee, and she left it there until she was asleep. I sat in that room for a long time after. Ruth and Samuel I put to bed after. Ruth was stiff, polite, correct. She said good night. I said good night. I did not push her. I knew enough about grief, even at 15, to know you cannot hurry it, and you cannot earn your way through someone else's. Samuels unexpectedly asked me if I knew any stories. I told him I knew a few. I told him one, something small and funny about a farmer and a stubborn goat, something my grandfather had told around the fire when I was very small. Samuel laughed once quietly, and then put his hand over his mouth as if the laugh had surprised him. He said good night. I said good night. Then I went downstairs. Elias was sitting at the kitchen table, with his Bible open and a lamp burning. He looked up when I came in. I stood in the doorway for a moment, and then I sat down across from him. He said, "They went down well." I said, "Hannah is easy. Ruth will take time." He said, "Yes." And he looked at me with something new in his expression. Not warmth. Exactly. Not yet, but a kind of attention, as if he were seeing me for the first time. We sat at that table for perhaps an hour. He asked me where I had grown up, as if he did not already know. And I think what he meant was, "Who are you?" I told him a few things. He told me a few things about the farm, about the children, about the winter. He did not talk about his wife directly. He talked around her the way you walk around something in the dark, knowing it is there, not ready to look at it straight. At some point he said, and I have thought about this sentence for 70 years, he said, "I know this is not what you would have chosen." I looked at him. He said, "I want you to know I understand that. I did not know what to do with that. I was 15, and I had been handed to this man by my father, and I had expected nothing from him that resembled recognition." I sat there for a moment in the lamplight, with his words in the air between us, and I said, "Then let us try to do this kindly," he said. "Yes." And he reached across the table, not for my hand, just toward me, a small gesture, a closing of the distance. And then he closed his Bible and said good night and went upstairs. I sat alone at the table for a while longer. I could hear the horses in the barn. A moth was at the lamp, somewhere above me in one of the small rooms. Hannah was asleep with the moon song still in her. I was 15 years old, and I was a wife and a mother and a stranger in a house that was not mine. And I thought, I cannot undo what has been done, but I can choose what I build here. I blew out the lamp and I went to bed. Here is what I need you to understand about that system. What was done to me in 1953 was not unusual. It was not spoken of as anything other than normal. Girls my age across the Old Order districts of Lancaster, Holmes, Elkhart, we were currency, practical, valued, transferred. The theology said, "Of woman submits, a man leads. A family is built on God's order." What the theology did not say, what it never said, was what a girl was supposed to do with the part of her that knew she was a person. My friend Lydia, we grew up in the same district, sat on the same bench at church, learned to cook in kitchens a mile apart. Lydia was matched to a man at 14. He was not kind the way Elias turned out to be. She told me once. We were old women by then, our hands both bent with age. She told me she had spent the first 20 years of her marriage being invisible. Not mistreated, invisible. He looked through her the way you look through a window, she said. I kept thinking, there must be something wrong with me, that I wanted to be seen. There was nothing wrong with her. There was never anything wrong with her. The system simply had no word for what she wanted, and so it had no place for it. Elias and I built something. It was not a romance. Let me not paint it in colors it did not have, but it was a life. Ruth came to me slowly, and then all at once, the way trust sometimes does. One morning she simply brought me her mending without being asked. And that was that. Samuel grew up and became a furniture maker. Hannah, my Hannah, the small one with the careful eyes, she is 66 years old now. She calls me every Sunday. She calls me ma'am. I left the Amish world many years after Elias died and the children were grown. That leaving is its own long story. I will tell it another time. What I will say now is that I came to the rest of my life very late, and I had to learn almost everything from the beginning. How to make a choice, how to want something, how to stand in a room without waiting for someone to tell me what to do next. I came late, but I came. If you were handed away before you were ready, if you were practical before you were a person, if you were someone's wife or someone's mother before you ever got to be yourself, I see you. If you are the woman who has been small for a long time in a house with other people in it, and you do not know yet how to begin to take up your own space, I see you. You were not wrong for wanting more than the life you were given. You were human, and that was never something to apologize for. If you want more stories from inside the world I came from, subscribe to Anna the Amish Grandmother. There is still so much I have not told you. If you stayed with me all the way through this story, thank you. There are women reading the years that are still yours tonight, who are sitting in the same quiet that you are sitting in right now. Women who began with one small thing, one evening chosen for themselves, one want finally spoken aloud, and found that the next thing was a little easier, and the next. The link is in the first comment of this video, if you would like to be one of them. And that is all I have. Until next time, the years in front of you are still yours. Do not give them away.